The majority of business will require fixed assets, land, building, plant, machinery. Profit after allowance for capital expenditure will give rise to demand for tax. The tax payment will probably occur sometimes after a profit has been earned, but will be eventually be a complete loss to the cash system of the business. The suppliers of capital to the business must be remunerated. Interest payment will be required periodically and regularly, although dividend payment will be made only if the profits are considered sufficient to justify them. But both type of payment will again be losers to the cash system. Cash flow will be managed therefore by controlling working capital, the control of debtors, stock and creditors, profit margins, capital expenditure, taxation. Tax management is a highly specialized special outside the scope of this study. Interest and dividend depend on the capital structure of the company. The first and the biggest component of the cash management is the level of cash which is supposed to come in. Cash forecasting was discussed earlier. Its importance in cash management cannot be undermined. Once we have forecasted the level of cash that is supposed to come in over the next few period, then we can look at what is the base level we need for our operations. Managing collection and disbursements. The size of the problem of cash management. Let us examine the flow of cash through a firm's account. It is useful to think of the process cycle in which cash is used to purchase materials from which are produced goods which are then sold to customers who later pay their bills. The firm receives cash from its customer and and the cycle repeat. So I don't need anyone. So compared to typically there was task in opportunities to improve efficiency in collecting and disbursing funds center of on flows through the current section of the balance sheet. Let us assume that XYZ corporation orders raw materials at point A and receives them south dash letter B. Terms of 2 by 10 net 30 are offered. So the firms pay the invoices 10 days Letter C. However, it takes 2 days of the check to clear. An XYZ bank account is not changed until point D. XYZ turns its inventory 6 times per year. So 60 days after the material are received, the product is sold and the customer is billed. The collection period is 30 days. 80, 80 for the customer and to pay uh, and 2 for the check to arrive by Gmail. XYZ XYZ processes the payment and the deposit is 2 days later at H. Another 2 days elapses while XYZ bank collects the funds from the customer's bank. The firm's total financing requirement is affected by the total time lag from point B to point J. The firm itself can control some factors that determine the various lags, but some it cannot. Some of the lag affect the cash balances, while others affect the other components of working capital such as accounts receivable and inventory. In addressing ourselves to cash management, we are concerned with time period BCD and FGHJ. Time period AB is beyond the firm's control and does not directly affect its financial statement, although it may affect production schedules. Time period DE is determined by the firm production process and inventory policy and affect the total investment in inventory. Time period EF is determined by the firm credit term and the payment policy of its customers and affect the total investment in accounts receivable. We, we will examine the management of inventory and account receivable in the next chapter. Our present task is to examine what can be done to improve the efficiency of a firm's cash management. We will focus on 3 areas: concentrating working balances, speeding collection, and controlling disbursements. Concentrating banking. Many firms need only one, only a single bank account. Large firms that operate over wide geographical areas usually need more than one, sometimes dozens, where many accounts are needed. Concentration account can be used to minimize the total requirement of working balances. Suppose a company has a number of branch offices, each with a local bank account. Branches collect accounts receivable and make deposit in their local accounts. Each day, funds 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 above a certain predetermined minimum are transferred to a central concentration account, usually at the firm's headquarters. The daily transfer of funds can be made either by a depository transfer check or by wire transfer. The latter is faster but more expensive. The funds transferred to the concentration account are available for disbursement for other purposes. As we will see later, the more variable a firm's cash flows, the higher the requirement of for working cash balances. By pooling its fund for disbursement in single account, the aggregate requirement for working balances is lower than it would be if balances were maintained at each branch office. Concentration in short permit to firm to store the its cash more efficiency. Speeding limits. Speeding collection. Another means of conservating cash is to reduce the lag between the time the customer mails and check and the time the funds become collected. That is from point F to J of the 6 days lag. 2 days are due to mail time. 2 days are due to processing time within XYZ corporation. And 2 days are due to collection time within bank. We will have more to say later about collection within the banking system. Let us now focus on the 4 days lag from F to Z. Small firms that operate in limited geographical areas often can do a little to reduce mail time. However, improvements often can be made in processing time within the firm. Suppose XYZ Corporation has credit sales of rupees 5 crore per year, with approximately 1 to 50 working days per year. XYZ's collection average rupees 20,000 per working day. If XYZ could reduce it by 20,000, XYZ borrowing cost was 9%. Saving of about rupees 1800 per year would be realized. This potential saving could be compared to the cost of faster processing to determine whether the change in processing should be made. We can conclude that internal processing should be speeding up to the point at which the cost of further improvement exceeds the saving. The second step that may be advantageous is to establish a locked box system which often can reduce mail and processing time still suffer. The firm first establishes a number of collection points, taking accounts of customer locations and mail schedules. At each location, the firm rent a post office and instrument its customer to remit to the box. The firm's local bank is authorized to pick up mail directly from the box. The bank does so perhaps several times a day, deposits the check in the firm's account. The bank made a record of names and amount and other data needed by the firm for internal accounting purposes and it immediately enter the check for collection. The logbook system result in two benefits to the firm. First, the bank perform the clerical task of handling the remittance prior to deposit, service which the bank may be able to perform at lowest cost. Second, and often more important, the, the process of collecting through the banking system begins immediately upon receipt of the remittance and does not have to wait until the firm completes its processing for internal accounting purposes. In the activity represented by H and H now takes place simultaneously with GS. The firms processes remittance for internal accounting purposes using data supplied by the bank and can schedule this processing at any time without delaying collection. Using the lockbox system as much as 4 days in mailing and processing time can be reduced. Banks charges for their services in connection with the lockbox of plan either via fees or compensating balance requirement, whether the saving with will outweigh the cost for particular company depend mainly on the geographical dispersion of customer, the rupees the rupee amount of the average remittance, the firm cost of financing. We see that the major advantage of spending collection is the free cash and thereby reduce the firm's total financing requirement. There are other advantages as well. By transferring clerical function to the bank, the firms may reduce its cost, improve internal control, and reduce the possibility of fraud. By getting check to the banks on which they are written sooner, the i- incidence of checks dishonored for insufficient funds may be reduced. Collection time in the banking system. We have made several references to the time required to collect a check through the banking system, but we have made no proposals to shorten it. Let us be more specific about what is involved. Suppose a customer in New Delhi purchases electronics equipment from firms in Mumbai and remits with checks drawn in on a New Delhi bank. The seller deposits the check in the bank in Mumbai, but the funds are not available for user use until the check has been presented physically to the New Delhi bank. The process that depends on the mail service between the two cities and may take several days. A expensive clearing network has been established in India that involves the commercial banks and the RBI. In the majority of cases, cleaning times has been reduced to 2 days or less using the facilities of the direct interbank clearing. In the matter of check clearing, the banks are the expert and the firms usually can rely on their banks to minimize the time requirement. Controlling disbursements such as pending collection turns accounts receivable into cash and thereby reduce the firm's financing requirement. Slowing disbursement does the same. In earlier chapter, we discussed the trade credit as a source of funds. Here we conclude that the proper policy was to pay within the terms agreed upon, taking the cash discounts when offered. We we conclude also that is no point in paying sooner than agreed. By waiting as long as possible, the firms maximizes the extent to which account payable are used as a source of funds, a source which requires no internet, no interest payment. Firms with expenses generating activity that over a wide area often find it advantageous to make disbursements from a single central account. In that way, schedules can be tightly controlled and disbursement can be made on exactly the right way. An alternative arrangement is to disburse from decentralized location locations, but to wire transfer to the exact amount needed in each local account for all disbursements scheduled that day. Some firms find it adventurous to exploit the checkbook plot, which is the time between the writing of the check and its presentation of collection, represented by CD. If this lag can be exploited. It offers at least partially the lag in other direction in collecting check, checks from customer as they because of lag CD. The firm's balance on the bank book is higher than its own checkbook. Knowing this, a firm may be able to reduce its working cash requirement. Banks understand checkbook float also and can be expected to set compensating balances and fees based on balances on their books. If a firm exploits bank checkbook float too far, it increases the likelihood of check being dishonored for insufficient funds and the accompanying displeasure of both bank and payee. Determining the appropriate working cash balance. Let us assume the firm now is collecting and disbursing it, its cash as effectively as possible. Given its long-term financial structure, fixed assets, long-term liabilities, and equity, its total cash position at any time is determined by its opening operating plan. Suppose total cash is more than the firm needs for operating purposes. Its disbursements are made according to plan. The Neptune company projected a total cash balance as high as rupees 4 lakhs 89,000 in November. Should all these funds be kept in Nep- Neptune's current account since current accounts earn no interest? It's no Neptune advantage to leave only the amount necessary to operate. And to invest the remainder temporarily in interest bearing liquid assets until needs needed. Our problem then is to determine how much cash a firm should maintain in its current account as a working balance. We will address this question here and in the next section discuss the investment of amounts above the working balances. The working balance is maintained for transaction purposes, for paying bills and collecting payments on accounts receivables. If the firm maintains too small a working balance, it runs out of cash. It then must liquidate marketable securities if available or borrow. Liquidating marketable securities and borrowing both involves transaction costs. costs. If no, if on the other hand the firm maintains too high a working balance, it forgoes the opportunity to earn interest on marketable securities. That it incurs what economists refer to as opportunity cost. Thus, the answers we seek in the optimal working balance rather than the minimum. Finding the optimum involves the trade off the transaction cost against the opportunity cost. If a firm tries to keep its working balance low, it will find itself selling securities and later repurchasing securities more often than if it aims to at a higher level of working balances. That is transaction cost fall as working balance level rises. Opportunity cost on the other hand rise as the level of working balances rises. There is a there is one point where sum of these two costs is at minimum. This is the point efficient management should try to find. Compensating balance requirements. If a firm uses bank credit as source of financing, the question of the optimal current account balance may have a simple answer. It may be dicta- dictated by its compensating balance requirement to compensate for various services such as processing checks and standby commitment to lend. In some cases, a firm may determine with very little analysis that its optimal working balance is below the bank's compensating balance requirement. In such cases, the latter figure becomes the firm's minimum current account balance. In other cases, where the answer is no, not so clear, or where compensating balances are not required, we must put pencil to paper to determine the appropriate working balance. Now we will talk about the finding the optimal working balance. Having done all we can to improve our collection and disbursement procedures, let us now uh, let us now take the pattern of receipts and disbursement as given over any time period. Firms beginning and ending cash balances are related as follows. Ending balance is equal to beginning balance plus receipts minus disbursement. If receipts and disbursement we constant each day, we would know with certainty what each would be each day, and our problem would be simple. Since the receipt always would exceed disbursement by the same account, we could withdraw the ending balance each day and use it for other purposes. In practice, we have two problems: variability and uncertainty. In most firms, receipts and disbursement vary both over the month and over the year. Over a month, receipt and disbursement for current operating expenses are likely to show some variation, perhaps in regular pattern. In seasonal firm, the amounts also will vary over the year. Less frequent outlays, such as those capital expenditure, taxes and dividends, introduce introduce still more variability. Some of these a second step that may be adventurous is to establish a lockbox system, which often can reduce mail and processing time still further. The, the firm first establishes a number of collection points, taking accounts of uh, customer location and mail schedules. At each location, the firm rents a post office box and estimates its customer to remit to the box. The firm's local bank is authorized to pick up mail directly from the box. The bank does so perhaps several times a day and deposits the check in the firm's account. The bank made a record of names and amount on the data needed by the firm for internal accounting purposes, and it immediately enter the checks for collection. The logbook system results in two benefits of the firm. First, the bank performs the clerical task of handling the remittance of prior to deposit services, which the bank may be able to perform at lower cost. Second, the often more important, the process of collecting through the banking system begins immediately upon receipt of remittance and does not have to wait until the firm completes its processing for internal accounting purpose. When the activity represented by H and HJ now takes place simultaneously with GH, the firm's processes remittances for internal Now we will talk about the collection time in the banking system. We have made several references to the time required to collect a check through the banking system, but it, but we have made no proposal to shorten it. Let us be more specific about what is involved. Suppose a customer in New Delhi purchases electronic equipment from a firm in Mumbai and remits it with check drawn on the New Delhi bank. The seller deposits the check in the bank in Mumbai, but the funds are not available for use until the check has been represented physically to the New Delhi bank, a process that depends on a mail service between the two cities and may take several days. A very extensive clearing network has been established in India that is involves the commercial banks and the RBI. In the majority of cases, clearing time has been reduced to 2 days or less using the facility of the direct interbanking clearing. In the matter of check clearing, the banks are the experts. The firms usually can rely on their banks to minimize the time requirements. Controlling disbursements, just as speeding collection turns account receivable into cash and thereby reduce the firm's account financing requirement. Flowing disbursements does the same. In earlier chapters, we discussed the trade trade credit as source of funds. Here we conclude that the proper policy was to pay within the terms agreed upon, taking cash discounts when offered. We conclude also that no point in paying sooner than agreed. By waiting by waiting as long as possible, the firm maximize the extent to which account payable are used as a source of funds, a source which required no interest payment. Firms with expense generating activity that over a wide area often find it advantageous to make disbursement from a single central account. In that way, schedules can be tightly controlled and disbursement can be made on the exactly the right day. An alternate arrangement is to dis- disburse from decentralized locations, but to wire transfer the exact amount needed in each local account for all disbursements scheduled that day. Some firms find it advantageous to exploit the checkbook float, which is the time between the writing of check and its presentation for collection, represented by CD. If this lag can be exploited, it offsets at least partially the lag in the other direction in collecting checks from customer. Because of the lag CD, a firm balances on the bank's book is higher than its own checkbook. Knowing this, a firm may be able to reduce its working cash requirement. Banks understand the checkbook float also the and can be expected to set compensating balances and fees based on balances on the bank book. If a firm exploits checkbook float too far, it it increases the likelihood of check being dishonored for insufficient funds and the accompanying displeasure of both banks and payee. Determining a appropriate working cash balance. Let us assume the firm now is collecting and disbursing its cash as effect, efficiently as possible. Given its long-term financial structure, fixed assets, long-term liabilities, and equity, its total cash position at any time is determined by its operating plan. Suppose total cash is more than the firm's needs for operating purposes. If disbursements are made according to plan, the Neptune company projected a total cash balance as high as rupees 489,000 in November. Should all these funds be kept in Neptune current account? Since current accounts earn no interest, it is to Neptune's advantage to leave only the amount necessary to operate and to invest in remainder temporarily in interest bearing liquid assets until needed. Our problem then is to determine how much cash is firm should maintain in its current account as a working balance. We will address this question here and in the next section. Discuss the investment of amount above the working balance. The working balance is maintained for transac- transaction purposes, for paying bills and collecting payment on accounts receivable. If the firm maintains too small for working balance, it runs out of cash. It then must liquidate marketable securities if available for or borrow. Liquidating marketable securities and borrowing both involves transaction costs. If on the other hand the firm maintains too high a working balance, it forgoes the opportunity to earn interest on marketable securities. That is, in it incurs what economists refer to as the opportunity cost. Thus, the answer we seek is the optimal working balance rather than the minimum. Finding the optimum involves a trade-off, a transaction cost against opportunity cost. If a firm tries to keep its working balance low, it will find itself selling securities and later repurchasing securities more often than if it aim at a higher level of working balances. That is, transaction cost fall as the working balance level rises. Opportunity cost, on the other hand, rises as the level of working balances rises. There is one point where the sum of the two costs two costs is at a minimum. This is the point efficient management should strive to find. Compensating balance requirement. If a firm uses bank credit as source of financing, the question of the optimal current account balance may have a simple answer. It may be di- dictated by its compensating balance requirements to compensate for various services such as processing checks and standby commitment to lend. In some cases, a firm may determine with very little analysis that is optimal working balance is below the bank compensating balance requirement. In such cases, the latter figure becomes the firm's minimum current account balance. In other cases, where the answer is not too clear or where compensating balances are not required, we must put pencil to paper to determine the appropriate working balance. Finding the optimal working balance. Having done all we can to improve our collection and disbursement procedures, let us now take the pattern of receipts and disbursement as given. Over any time period, firm's beginning and ending cash balances are related as follows. Ending balance is equal to beginning balance plus receipts minus disbursement. If receipt and disbursement we constant each day, we would notice certainly what it would be each day, and our problem would be simple. Since receipt always would exit disbursement by the same account, we count withdraw the ending balance each day and use it for other purposes. In practice, we have two problems: variability and uncertainty. Now we will talk about the variability, right? Now we will talk about the variability. Suppose the receipt and disbursement both vary and are not synchronized, but the variations are completely predictable. Determining the appropriate working balance in the face of non-synchronous but predictable cash flow is a problem of minimizing total costs. If we set the balance too low, we incur high transaction cost. One might say we make too many trips to the bank. If we set the balance too high, we lose too much interest on marketable securities. At all. The determination of the optimal working balance under the condition of uncertainty can be viewed as an inventory problem in which we balance the cost of too little cash transaction cost against the cost of too much cash opportunity cost. If the cash shortage becomes severe enough, we may begin to forgo cash discount on purchases, adding another element of opportunity cost. The determination, the determination of the optimal working balance under condition of the certainty can be viewed as an inventory problem in which we balance the cost of too little cash transaction cost against the cost of too much cash opportunity cost. If the cash shortage becomes severe enough, we may begin to forgo cash discount. Now we will talk about another paragraph. Former models of the cash balance problem we have been developed using inventory theory. Inputs to such a problem model are the total net cash outflow over the period of the time in question, the transaction cost of replenishing the cash balance by selling securities on borrowing, and the interest rate that can be earned on securities. The answer given by the model tells us how often and in what amounts one's funds would be transferred to the checking account from the other sources. Now we will talk about the another topic, uncertainty. Receipt and disbursement are very seldom completely predictable. If we go to the opposite extreme in assume receipt and disbursement for the difference between them to be completely random. A different kind of model can be developed using the technique of control theory. In addition to information on transaction cost and interest rates on securities, we need a measure of the variability of net cash flows. Using this data, we can determine the optimal maximum and minimum balances in the firm's checking account, denoted by levels X and Y. In the firm's working cash balance fluctuates randomly in response to random inflows and outflows. At a time t1, the balance reaches the upper control limit y. At that point, yx money is transferred out of the cash account and into marketable securities. The balance continues to fluctuate, falling to 0 at A2, at which time X value of marketable security are sold and proceeds transferred to the working balance. The control limit model thus given as answer in terms of maximum and minimum balances to provide a decision rule rather than a fixed schedule of transfer as did the simple inventory mode. One of the one of the important insight of the control limit model is that where cash flows are uncertain, the greater the variability, the higher the minimum balance. I will talk about using mathematical models. Formal mathematical models such as those mentioned above are useful for increasing our understanding of the cash management problem and providing insight and qualitative guidance. The model tells us which factors are important and make the trade-offs explicit. We see, for example, the transaction cost play a central role. If transaction cost were zero, the firm would require no working cash balance at all. It simply would sell securities or borrow to pay every bill. Are formal mathematical models also useful for quantitative applications? In practice, cash flow patterns of most firms are partly predictable and partly random. Neither the inventory model nor the control limit model is strictly applicable. By combining the insights from formal model with the techniques of the cash budgeting and pro forma analysis, many firms can arrive at a reasonable answers by experience and experiment in deciding how far to go in analyzing the problem. We must consider the cost of the analysis. Expect in the case of very large firms. Quantitative solution to the cash balance problem. Using formal mathematical models are likely to uneconomical. Often the cost of obtaining the necessary input data and operating the model exceeds the saving or solution that can be attained by experience and experiment. As always, we must keep an eye on the cost of our analytical technique as well on the benefit. Planning cash requirement. In most cases, to search for the optimal working cash balance probably overstated our capabilities. We must be content to get in most cases to search for optimal working cash balance probably overstate our capabilities. क्या